All right, you bastards, welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going balls deep into the shit show that was Bashar al-Assad's reign in Syria. You know, the dude who went from poking around in eyeballs to uh, allegedly gassing his own people? Let's cut the crap. This guy's family treated Syria like their own personal playground for decades.
It's wild as how Assad's background as an ophthalmologist just clashes so hard with the brutality of his rule. Makes you wonder, right? How someone who's supposed to heal can turn into a goddamn tyrant.
Yeah, it's some real Jekyll and Hyde shit. I mean, the guy wasn't even supposed to be president. His older brother was next in line.
Yeah.
Until a car accident, kind of messed things up.
Right. A convenient tragedy, you might say. After his brother Basil died in 94, they changed the constitution, lowered the age limit to 34. Bashar's age, what a coincidence, and boom, he's president in 2000.
So a little bit of fate, a dash of legal maneuvering, and this eye doctor finds himself running a whole damn country. And you know what? At first, people were actually optimistic. They called it the Damascus Spring.
Ah, yes, the Damascus Spring. A brief period of hope that Assad would loosen the reins, maybe bring in some reforms. But that shit went south real quick.
So what happened? Did the Damascus Spring just wither and die?
Pretty much. Assad clamped down hard, man. Censorship went through the roof. Anyone who spoke out got silenced. Any dreams of democracy crushed. It became clear this dude wasn't messing around.
All right, so we've got a dictator in the making, cracking down on his own people. What happens next? I'm guessing things don't exactly get better, right?
Fast forward to 2011, the Arab Spring kicks off across the Middle East, and guess who gets caught in the crossfire? Syria. And let's just say Assad didn't exactly handle the protests with a gentle touch.
Hold up. Rewind a sec. For those of us who slept through history class, what the hell was the Arab Spring?
Basically a bunch of uprisings and protests, sparked by this Tunisian dude who set himself on fire because he was so pissed off with the government. It spread like wildfire across the Arab world. People demanding democracy, an end to corruption, the whole shebang.
Okay, got it. So these protests hit Syria. And Assad, being the chill dude that he is, decides to, unleash hell.
Let's just say his response wasn't exactly winning any humanitarian awards. Think brutal crackdowns, mass arrests, the whole 9 yards. It was the spark that ignited the Syrian civil war. And let me tell you, this shit was a dumpster fire of epic proportions.
All right, we got to talk about the elephant in the room. War crimes. This wasn't just some boys will be boys kind of war. We're talking accusations of torture, chemical weapons, the whole fucked up package.
Yeah, the UN's got a whole laundry list of allegations against Assad. Unlawful killings, torture, disappearances, sexual violence, the works. And that's not even scratching the surface of the sheer brutality unleashed on the Syrian people.
Let's get specific. What about those chemical weapons attacks? I remember seeing those images of people choking, dying in the streets. That shit was straight out of a nightmare.
Yeah. Ghouta 2013. Over 1,000 people, many of them kids, wiped out by sarin gas. The world was horrified. Even for a conflict as messy as this, it was a new low.
And I bet Assad just denied it all right. Blame the rebels, some rogue squirrel with a gas mask, anything but himself.
Pretty much. But the evidence pointed straight at the Syrian government. And it wasn't just Ghouta. There were other attacks too. Khan al-Assal Kafrazita. It became this horrific pattern of using chemical weapons to terrorize the population.
So we've got a dictator who's allegedly gassing his own people, unleashing hell on his country. You'd think the international community would step in, right?
Well, they stepped in all right. It's not the way you'd think. The Syrian civil war became this giant clusterfuck of international meddling. It was like every superpower had their own favorite puppet in the game, throwing money and weapons around like it was confetti.
So you're telling me Syria was just a playground for these big dick countries to flex their muscles?
Pretty much. Russia and Iran, they were Team Assad all the way, providing military support, keeping them afloat. On the other side, you had the U.S., Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, all backing different rebel groups.
Wait, so even the good guys were playing favorites. What a bunch of hypocrites.
It's all about geopolitics, man. Nobody's got clean hands in this mess. The U.S. was worried about Iranian influence. Saudi Arabia was playing the Sunni Shia card. Turkey had their own Kurdish problem to deal with. It was a goddamn free-for-all.
And in the middle of all this chaos, who pops up but ISIS? Seriously? Could this shit get any more fucked up?
The rise of ISIS was straight out of a horror movie. They thrived on the instability, chaos is a ladder and all that. They were brutal as hell. Beheadings, mass executions, selling women into slavery. They scared the shit out of everyone, even Assad.
So you're saying even a dictator like Assad was freaked out by these ISIS maniacs?
They were a threat to everyone, man. They wanted to establish their own caliphate. A goddamn medieval theocracy in the 21st century.
Look, explain this caliphate thing for those of us who don't speak jihadi.
Basically, they wanted to create an Islamic empire ruled by Sharia law. stretching across Syria, Iraq, and beyond. It was like a fucked up throwback to the Middle Ages, but with AK-47s and Twitter accounts.
So they were like religious fanatics with a social media strategy. Talk about a terrifying combination.
Exactly. They were savvy as hell, using propaganda and social media to recruit fighters from all over the world. It was like a global jihadi franchise, and they were attracting some serious talent.
And how did the rest of the world react to this ISIS bullshit?
Everyone was shitting their pants, basically. The U.S. got involved, airstrikes, special forces, the whole 9 yards. Even Russia and Assad had to put their differences aside and fight against these guys. It was like a temporary truce in a bigger, even more messed up war.
Talk about strange bedfellows. So we've got this proxy war going on, ISIS running amok, and Assad just chilling in his palace, gassing anyone who looks at him funny. What was life actually like for ordinary Syrians in all this?
No, it was hell on earth. Imagine your country being torn apart by war bombs dropping left and right. Different factions fighting each other, food and water, scarce hospitals getting bombed, your friends and family disappearing.
So basically a nonstop shitstorm of death and destruction.
Exactly. Millions of people were displaced, becoming refugees in their own country or fleeing to neighboring countries, Europe, anywhere they could find safety. It was a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions.
All right, let's talk about the corruption angle. I mean, we know dictators are usually not known for their honesty, but how bad was it under Assad?
Oh, it was bad, man. Real bad. Assad and his cronies were basically running the country like a mafia operation. His cousin, Rami Makhlouf, became the richest man in Syria, controlling everything from telecoms to oil.
So while the country's going to hell in a handbasket, this dude's just lining his pockets.
He was living large, man. Palaces, yachts, the whole 9 yards. And the worst part, this corruption fueled the resentment that led to the uprising in the first place. People were struggling to put food on the table while this guy was living like a king.
It's like a real-life episode of House of Cards, but with more bloodshed and fewer witty one-liners.
The thing is, this corruption wasn't just about money. It was about power, about controlling every aspect of Syrian society. Assad's regime wasn't just brutal, it was rotten to its core.
So how the hell did Assad manage to cling to power for so long with all this shit going on?
Well, let's not forget his buddies in Moscow. Russia's support was crucial for Assad's survival. They provided military muscle, diplomatic cover at the UN, the whole shebang. Without Putin's backing, Assad would have been toast years ago.
So the big bad bear was propping up the dictator all along. Makes sense. They're both kind of fond of silencing their critics, right? But why would Russia even bother getting involved in this mess?
Syria was Russia's only real foothold in the Middle East. It gave them access to a warm water port, a strategic advantage they weren't willing to give up, and it was a chance to poke the U.S. in the eye. You know, the whole Cold War rivalry thing never really went away.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. So we've got a brutal dictator clinging to power, a country ravaged by war international powers, playing their own games, and ISIS throwing a wrench into the works. What the hell happens next?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Getting rid of a dictator doesn't magically fix a broken country, especially when it's been shattered into 1,000 pieces like Syria.
So you're saying it's not exactly happily ever after in Damascus these days?
Not quite. Remember all those rebel groups we talked about? The ones backed by everyone and their grandma. Well, they're still there, fighting for scraps of power. You've got the Kurds in the northeast, carving out their own little autonomous zone. And let's not forget the remnants of ISIS. Those cockroaches are hard to kill.
So basically, it's like a game of whack-a-mole with warlords and terrorists popping up all over the place.
It's a goddamn mess, that's for sure. And then you've got the humanitarian crisis. Millions of people displaced, living in refugee camps, struggling to survive. Rebuilding Syria is going to take a Herculean effort. And frankly, I'm not sure anyone's got the stomach for it.
What about those peace talks everyone keeps yapping about? Any chance those clowns can actually agree on something?
Let's just say optimism isn't exactly running high. The UN's been trying to broker a deal for years. But it's like herding cats. Everyone's got their own agenda, their own red lines. It's a recipe for stalemate.
So what's the end game here? Is Syria just doomed to be a perpetual war zone?
I wouldn't go that far. But the road ahead is long and bloody. The best case scenario. Some kind of power-sharing agreement. A fragile peace that keeps everyone from killing each other, at least for a while. The worst case. Syria descends into even deeper chaos, a failed state that becomes a breeding ground for terrorism and instability.
Cheerful stuff. So what can the average Joe listening to this, do about it? Besides hitting the bottle, I mean.
The first step is understanding the complexity of this shit show. Don't buy into simplistic narratives. The good guys versus bad guys bullshit, it's way more nuanced than that. Educate yourself, challenge those who spout propaganda, and support organizations working on the ground to help the Syrian people.
Right. Fair enough. Knowledge is power and all that jazz.
Yeah.
So to wrap this up, what's the biggest takeaway from this whole Assad saga?
Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. Assad started out as an eye doctor, maybe with good intentions, who the hell knows. But the allure of power turned him into a monster. It's a cautionary tale. A reminder that even seemingly normal people can be capable of horrific things when given the chance.
Well, that's a thought to chew on. Thanks for dropping some knowledge on us.
Anytime, man.
All right, you degenerates. That's it for our deep dive into the clusterfuck that was Bashar al-Assad's Syria. Hopefully you learned something. But even if you didn't, at least you got a good dose of cynicism and profanity. Until next time, stay informed, stay skeptical, and try not to get blown up. Peace out.